Good morning. Thank you so much. I hope you all had coffee. I didn't, so I apologize if I sound a little bit slow this morning. Yes, the talk is about what are the limits or the risks that we have when we face trust in AI, especially when we focus on the uses of AI in cybersecurity. I should say, as a warning, I'm a philosopher, so at some point you will hear some philosophy. If I do it well, it will be like a doctor giving you an injection. Just a little bit of pain, but not too much. Don't run out of the room. Resist the temptation. It won't be too strong of a pain. So let me start with the definition of AI. There is a lot of hype about what is AI. We hear science fiction proto-argument made every day, the Terminator, the enslaver, paper-clipping machine enslaving us all. Well, that's all good sci-fi, no science in there. So this is an article we published with my research group last year, where we defined AI as a growing resource of interactive, autonomous, and self-learning agency, which can be used to perform tasks that would otherwise require human intelligence to be executed successfully. 2 points to this definition. The first one is about the intelligence of AI. There is none. AI is not intelligent in the way you or I would be intelligent. No intuitions, no gut feelings, no emotions, no ideas. It behaves performing tasks that if I were to perform them, adjusting the temperature of this room on the basis of how we feel, whether cold or hot, you would think that I had some intelligence to do that. It's performing a task. And the other part is, that is relevant for this talk, is the nature of AI. Is this interactive, autonomous, and self-learning agency. This is where the deal starts. It's the first time in the history of humanity where we have machines which are autonomous, not automatic. And by autonomous, I mean machines that can interact, learn, improve their interaction with the environment without a direct intervention of the designer, the engineer, the programmer, you name it. This is where all the ethical issues and the issues that we have with AI and the potential of AI begins. So there are a bunch of ethical challenges. I told you I'm a philosopher that comes with AI. We identified 5 of those last year. I'll just name them and then I'll delve into 3 which are more relevant when we think about AI in cybersecurity. The challenges go from enabling human wrongdoing, reducing human control, removing human responsibility, devaluating human skill, eroding human self-determination. The first challenge comes with the forms of control. We trust AI these days with a lot of sensitive tasks, whether it is reading an X-ray to identify a cancer or a disease, deciding whom to appoint at the next recruitment exercise, coming from my hotel to here and getting lost 2 times. There is a lot of trust, but most forms of AI, the most refined forms, remain black boxes. We cannot explain, given the input, given the infrastructure, the architecture, how the output has been determined. We cannot predict it. How do we deal with machines which are this complex and yet performing tasks so sensitive to us? The other challenge has to do with Rachel. I'm sure I don't have to introduce Rachel to you. We have all watched Blade Runner. And it comes with the idea of anthropomorphizing AI, looking at AI as if it were another form of humanity. And this is wrong on many levels. The most dangerous one is the idea that if we start conceptualizing AI as a form of humanity, then we start thinking that AI is responsible for its own behavior. We forget that humans remain responsible for the successes and the failures of AI themselves. And the risk is not run just in remote universities somewhere in the world. The European Parliament last year suggested we should grant legal personhood to AI systems so that we can maintain them responsible when they do mistakes. There would have been nothing more wrong than that. And the other point that is worth considering when it comes to AI and cybersecurity is the use of AI to perform tasks that we no longer want to perform. We delegating tasks. We should make sure that in doing so, we don't give up the skills. We still want pilots to be able to land a plane, doctor to read an X-ray, because otherwise we don't know when AI fails, or we don't know what to do when AI just doesn't work. So keep in mind these 3 challenges, because they'll come back later in this talk. Many of you might be familiar with this picture. It got viral in 2014. A snapshot of Northside website is a dynamic map of the internet traffic, and at some point the map showed more than 4,000 cyber attacks going on in the span of 1 minute. It was 2014, so we might be tempted to think, well, actually, yes, that was 5 years ago. We didn't have any AI, we didn't have the technology we have these days, we didn't have the fundings that we have these days in this market. Surely things are going better. Sorry, guys. No, really. 2019, the World Economic Forum, the Global Risk Report, stresses that cyber attacks are among the top 5 sources of global risks these days. Gemalto published a report early last year where it says, well, actually, in 2018, the first 6 months, there were 4.5 billion records compromised in the first 6 months, and the number basically is double for the amount of records compromised throughout 2017. And Microsoft showed us that in 2018, 60% of the attacks lasted less than 1 hour, relied on new forms of malware. So things are not going well in that context. And this is where I can actually offer a segue to the previous talk. AI can help. It is true. It can help with respect to system robustness. We can use AI to verify and validate our codes, to make sure we find bugs much earlier, much more precisely than we often do. It can help with system response. There are companies, I come from the UK, so perhaps Darkspace, they offer systems to respond to attacks in an autonomous way. The 2016 Cyber Grand Challenge run by DARPA showed that actually we can use AI to make sure the system can fight each other without any human control or interaction over it. And it can help with system resilience, monitoring a system and improve threat and anomaly detection, taking down the dwelling time from weeks to hours. These are 3 areas where we know that AI can help. Be mindful, none of these 3 areas, the use of AI, come without ethical consequences. In red you find the consequences. You remember the 3 slides before. So using AI for system robustness, well, it means that we might be giving away a little bit more control than we want, because we're delegating to a machine which we don't really understand or can explain a very important and delicate task. If we get 2 machines fighting each other and at each interaction escalating or refining their attacks and something goes wrong, how do we ascribe responsibilities? And that's a key question, especially when we think about the use of AI for system response for national defense. And system resilience. It is true that analyst teams are overwhelmed by work, but if we start relying on AI for threat and anomaly detection all the time, where do the skills go, the human skills go? How do we retain them? So far, that's, let's say, half of the story. This is how AI can help cybersecurity. But there is another point that is worth stressing there, which is that AI itself, okay, there is, I'm messing with my slides. AI itself is not a safe or robust systems. AI is actually very vulnerable, as you might know better than I do. There are several kinds of attacks that can actually undermine the very use of AI in a specific way. Data poisoning. There was a recent study that showed that you can only poison up to 8% of the data used by a system. In a specific case, it was a system to run drug administration in an hospital in the US. And by poisoning 8% of the data, 78% of the patient got the wrong dosage of their treatment. Backdoors. You insert a backdoor in a neural network, there is no source code, you might never know that the system has been tampered with. And so playing with categorization model, I think it was very famous, the study where a bunch of computer scientists designed a 3D turtle and then used it to mess up with a neural network model so that the model would identify turtles as rifle. Suppose the model would have been used for national defense, then we would have been a real issue. So the problem with cyber attacks and AI is that attacks have gone from extracting data from systems, disrupting systems, to acquiring control of systems. Because if you can do that, and if you can do that below a certain threshold, you can control the systems to which you have delegated the security of your infrastructure, to give an example. So how do we deal with that? Now, I'm not sure what happened with my slides, so I'm going to venture here and see what happens, but yeah. So there is a lot of discussion these days how to trust AI so that we can deploy AI more often for cybersecurity purposes. This is a list of ongoing initiatives. As you can see, the US Executive Order, the EU Commission Cybersecurity Act, the guidelines of the Commission, the IEEE report on deploying standards for AI in cybersecurity. They all rely on this idea of trust. We should trust AI despite notwithstanding the vulnerabilities and the fragilities of these systems. The point with trust is that when you think of it as a philosopher, trust is a specific thing. It's a way of running a relational delegation, where you have delegation with no control. When you trust something to do a task, and you delegate the task and don't supervise, don't control the way that task is executed. Trust rests on the assessment of trustworthiness of the trustee, so the technology in front of us. And trustworthiness is nothing but a measure of the predictability of the behavior of the trustee and the risks that the trustor runs if the trustee behaves differently. Now, we can easily understand what are our risks when it comes to AI and cybersecurity if AI misbehaves or behaves differently from what we expect. It's very hard to predict AI and the behavior of AI in the future. And the reason why is this, well, there you go, is because robust AI is something that is very complicated and very hard to assess, possibly unfeasible to assess. There are a lot of initiatives going on in the world to work on developing robust AI. ISO is prompting or defining a standard on this. DARPA has a research project working on AI that cannot be deceived. The US Executive Order is pushing work in this area, and even China is prompting standardization to develop robust AI. What's the point? Well, the point is that when it comes to robustness and AI, we're talking about two things that don't really go hand in hand. As you know, robustness is the measure of the divergence of the behavior of a system once the system is fed with perturbated data or the model is perturbated. So assessing AI, assessing robustness requires understanding all possible sources of perturbation and calculating that delta. When it comes to AI, we have two kinds of problems. On the one side, attacks on AI can be deceptive. You can have a backdoor in a neural network, and you might not know until the backdoor is triggered. And once the backdoor is triggered, the divergence of the behavior is not really huge. If the divergence of the behavior can go under a certain threshold, you might never know that your system has been tampered. So there is a deception of AI, which is quite likely. There is a lack of transparency. We cannot explain how a certain output is produced by a given input. So how do we know whether a certain output is given as a consequence of the right or the wrong input? And finally, assessing robustness requires understanding all possible perturbation. But when it comes to AI, the number of possible perturbation is astronomically large. Think about image recognition. It goes down to a pixel level. So if you are a logician like I am, you will say that this is a problem which is computationally untractable problem. It means that, yeah, in theory you can understand, you can enumerate all possible sources of perturbation to AI systems. In practice, this is impossible. So we cannot know. We cannot know how robust our AI systems are. And if we cannot know how robust our AI systems are, well, we don't know whether these systems are trustworthy or not. And you remember trust? It requires trustworthiness. So if we cannot define AI systems trustworthiness, we should not trust AI in cybersecurity. It's conceptually misleading, but it's operationally very, very dangerous. Because what we're facing are systems which can be deceived without us ever knowing it. In the meanwhile, we are delegating to these systems the security of national critical infrastructures, for example. So how do we deal with that? And this is my last slide, apparently. The following are three suggestions that I offered in a paper that got published in Nature this week. And the idea is that because AI is not trustworthy, especially when it comes to cybersecurity tasks, it does not mean that we should not use AI for cybersecurity purposes. There are evident advantages that come from its deployment in cybersecurity. It's just a matter of understanding that we cannot afford to forego control. It's a matter of understanding that because we cannot calculate and assess the trustworthiness of AI, we can delegate tasks to AI, but we need to have in place some forms of control of these systems. So we came up with 3 suggestions, which go from foster in-house development. Now, these 3 suggestions I should mention, they are really targeting services of AI for cybersecurity, which focus to support national critical infrastructures. Infrastructures going on in megacities like the one in the picture. When it comes to that, we cannot really take the risks of delegating and not controlling, because the consequences and the risks would be very high. So at that level of business, the suggestion would be make sure that you resist the temptation to machine learning as a service. Cloud systems, buying models, the models or data set, well, that's a way where attacks come in. So start with developing in-house the data set, the model, the training procedure. Adversarial training. We know that AI systems improve their functioning through feedback loops, which allow them to change their variables and coefficients. They improve the more the system and the adversarial training uses models which are really very refined. So the idea is that we should start defining standards which mandate the level of refinement for adversarial training. And finally, parallel and dynamic control, and this is the most important suggestion perhaps. AI systems, as we said at the beginning, learn, and they change their behavior throughout their deployment. So if we are thinking of maintaining control, well, control cannot happen just at the beginning of the process. It has to go hand in hand with the whole deployment of the system itself. So what we suggested was that when it comes to this high level of security risks and AI supporting national critical infrastructure, well, we should have a twin model from the one that we deploy in the real world. And the twin model is not a simulation, it's not something that runs abstract. It's something that is kept in a controlled environment and work as a benchmark with respect to the deployed model, so that we know when there is too much of a divergence between the original and the twin, that something is going wrong and we can intervene. One more. So yeah, you remember at the beginning of this talk, there was this definition on AI as a growing resource of interactive, autonomous, and self-learning agency. This is where the potential begins. This is where the risks begin. We can use AI to improve the way we perform, or it performs tasks which are very sensitive, but it is also require fundamental, constant forms of control and monitoring. And to help or to use AI with the 3R tasks, the robust, the resilience, and the response systems, we need to forego the idea of trust in AI and support what we call reliable AI. So an AI that can perform tasks, but which is also controlled while performing these tasks. And it's not just my word. You might be familiar with the OECD principles for ethical AI. One of the principles stresses that AI systems must function in a robust and secure and safe way throughout their life cycles, and potential risks should be continually assessed and managed. And this is a way of implementing this principle. This is the work that I do, but also my lab in Oxford does. It's called the Digital Ethics Lab. And with this, I thank you.